Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jason.
And I'm Devin.
This show is a nonlinear and unfiltered exploration of people and their thoughts.
Welcome to the Thought Safari. For those listening, Jason and I obviously met in group school, which you've heard countless stories already and probably countless more to come. Training program in Connecticut, Hartford, and our guest today is none other than the Rev, Taelor Gray, who we met in Connecticut at this group school that we were in. One of our favorite people that we met there when Jason and I put our heads together to kind of start this podcast and came up with some people that we wanted to really kick it off with. You know, we tended to lead towards people that might know us and be favorable, and not just saying it because you're here, but you were in the top three names shouted out by both of us right out of the gate. So yeah, that's where we met, and would love to get your take on kind of your perspective on how we met, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, Taelor Gray, Columbus, Ohio, Midwest kid. Got to meet a lot of really cool people in Hartford, Connecticut. I believe the fateful year was 2012. 2012.
2012.
Yep.
Man, what a time to be alive. We all just collided together in that room, and I think magic ensued. I don't think they've had a better group school class since. I
Not a
just can't
chance.
imagine it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Those folks in that room, that was like lightning in a bottle for me. And these two brothers left a huge impression on me in a number of different ways. Jason was my first partner, and I don't know if you guys, I mean, got a chance to take in that photo I sent to the group chat, but just so much from that was we walked those streets. I just felt like, this town wasn't big enough for us. It wasn't ready for what was getting ready to happen, but we got put on the spot to do presentations. We met people who we thought were going to become rock stars that, had different stories. We became embroiled in different controversies, but I think the relationships that we have, man, like I don't see how we can't reconnect and make sure that this continues to go for a lifetime. So there's too many stories to count. I'm just honored that we're still connected.
Yeah, we appreciate having you, Rev. And from my perspective, you were again one of our favorite people, not only in the group school class, but just all time. I mean, you're just one of those guys that from the moment we met you, it was like, dude, he's something special. He's the Rev. And Dev and I often talk about, there are some people that you just instantly click with. There's no rhyme. There's no reason. It's like, me and the color green. It just works. And you were always that guy that just worked, man. Like first day in class, you and I teamed up. And then, from there, rest is history. And now, reconnecting, 12 years later, at times it feels like it was just yesterday. We were running through the halls in that, that
Yes.
fateful summer in the heartbeat. And just delighted to have you, man. One question that we usually like to ask every single guest: what do you know more about than most people on the planet?
Oh,
Yeah. So,
man.
so it can be just as a little helper. It could be anything you have been going through recently and you happen to know a lot about. You just researched XYZ. Could be what you're going through in your life. It could be what you used to do, what you're about to do. Anywhere you want to take it. This is a safari. You're the tour guide.
Yeah. What do I know more about than anyone else? Um, I
Or more
know,
than most people, put it that way.
okay, more than most people. I know what the function of the religious institution is in the United States of America. Um, and I know I'm just kind of jumping right in there, and I mean the
Buckle
function.
up, ladies and gentlemen,
Get ready.
because function is a big word.
Function, yes, emphasis on function. So yeah, I think I can't disconnect my experience from some of the things that I've seen and the people that I've met and the way different people's lives have turned out. even to the point where how I look at where our country is right now. So faith is a big part of my journey, and I think I can now make distinctions between a personal pursuit of faith and the function of the religious institutions of our country. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, so
Oh, but
yeah,
we don't leave anything at that at the safari.
you'll leave it at that. Get him, Dev.
No, I mean you got to give us. So you just gave us like the title, right?
Right.
And now you got to give us like at least the preface into. Let's just say if
Yeah.
we're gonna go down an avenue, let's go down the function avenue.
Yeah. I think there are elements of economics. I think there are elements of politics. I think there are elements of culture, relationship, music, creative spaces that can be controlled by religious institutions, can be ultimately directed in certain ways based on the whims of people who are in power. And specifically in the religious space, there are ways that influences can be directed to control schools of thought and outcomes that play out in communities. So,
Wow.
I serve in a low income, underserved community, and there are messages that can go to that community that either keeps people where they are and keeps them complacent, keeps them satisfied, or it can motivate them to change their circumstance and ultimately try to see a more hopeful outlook than where they are. So, guys, I unfortunately I've been trained in a little bit of diplomacy and the way that I frame things. You guys are gonna have to just pull it out of me if you want me to
No,
go
you
there.
did great.
All right,
Yeah, no,
cool.
that makes total sense. And so I mean it is a heavy topic, and if you thought you were gonna leave this safari without unpacking it to its fullest potential, you're dead wrong. So to me, what I'm hearing is that faith has a tremendous influence, if not perhaps an outsized influence, on what happens in all sorts of facets of our society and daily lives. So, one big question for you is, do you think, on the whole, faith is doing a good job or a bad job for people more broadly throughout the United States?
Bad job. Bad job. Um, I think it is again kind of a man. I didn't expect to go this way this quickly, but I think that there has been a way to control what people think faith is that doesn't kind of spring from personal exploration, an individual journey, or even some sort of reflection that shows up in the practice of your faith and expression of it in your life. So instead, you get brands, you get enterprises, you get kind of these institutions of power that tell you to parrot a certain message instead of using your own language, using your brain, and trying to come to some practical conclusions about what kind of faith you have and what you're going to practice. So I think people are just looking to rally around the easiest messages, the ones that can travel the furthest for the outcomes that ultimately will control people. So I don't mean to sound like I'm in an underground tunnel somewhere because I understand the function and I have friends all across the spectrum. But I think this time where you guys caught me is where I became a little bit more disillusioned about what it is I'm involved in, and we're also just coming out of a global pandemic that affected the way everybody thought.
Question for you along those lines, like obviously you're someone that grew up kind of in the church, more involved in the church, I would say, than most average churchgoers, right? Family ties, etc. Like, is this something that kind of like surprised you and came out of left field? Did you have an inkling as to some of the and I'll give you a personal example. Like, I was very involved in my church when I was a young kid, and I was asked in high school to be on sort of like they had this makeshift board of people, and they wanted representatives from all the walks of life in our congregation.
Hmm.
And I think I was a sophomore, junior in high school, and I was asked to be like the youth representative in our church on this board. And it was the first time that I sort of, call it, peek behind the curtain and saw sort of the inner workings of the church, some of which are unavoidable in the sense of like it is an operational business and there are certain decisions that have to be made to keep, whether it be the building operational, there's money involved, right? So there's naturally an aspect to that you don't normally see if you're just sitting in the congregation. But point being, like, did some of this sort of functionality or down that avenue of functionality surprise you and catch you off guard, or was it
Yeah.
just like a different version of it or more extreme than you had ever anticipated?
Yeah, it did surprise me, just kind of as I started to expand in some of my experiences. My network expanded, just in terms of people, humans that I got to know and listen to. You guys, I feel like when we spent time together at group school, I spent a lot of time just listening and learning. I wasn't really trying to project a lot of what I believed, and unless I felt like I was being asked a direct question. But when I was younger, I felt like I was being taught not to think, and that started to become a little bit more apparent as I was heading to my college years. And once you go to college, and I went to the Ohio State University, like, no, you got to start thinking. People aren't just going to accept what you say, and you're out of the bubble. It's over. You have to start interacting with other ideas and seeing if your belief system holds up. So I had to start asking questions of my parents, and I made some enemies early on. Like, I was a know-it-all, whatever. I don't know if you guys interact with the Enneagram that much, but I've been categorized as a 1 on the Enneagram, which is a person who's very, like, justice centered. So I'll advocate for somebody I feel like has been done wrong, but then that also leads me to be like a perfectionist, which I'm hypercritical of myself. So if I feel like groups of people have been led astray, I'm like, that's wrong. That's, totally a misrepresentation of that idea. But then I also have like this personal reflection of, what are you doing? Like, are you even representative of the idea that you're asking people to travel to? So like all of that was going on in my early 20s and my mid 20s. By the time I met you guys, I was ready to just have a completely different experience. So I traveled away from my parents' church. I traveled away from those relationships, and I went into a whole new expression of what the church could be.
And so okay, what's interesting about this day and age is I feel like without getting outside of our conversation, we are really starting to muddle the definitions of a lot of words. And
Yes.
that causes a lot of problems because as I'm sitting here listening to you, when you first started talking, faith felt very, I'm a kid, I'm at church, there's Jesus on the cross, there's God, faith. As I've gotten older, my definition of faith has expanded because now all of a sudden, without getting into specifics of our political climate, people are placing faith in other things, right? So when you're talking about faith and in this discussion, there can be faith in institutions, there could be faith in people, there could be faith in the Almighty God. How do
Yes.
you think about faith and how do you define it in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, I was recently talking to one of my mentors about this, and I'm in this quest for language. I'm like, I struggle with the language that we have, and feel like it's limited. Feel like we should be able to articulate what we're trying to say in more ways than just the typical response. So when I think of faith, he challenged me to think of it in the vein of trust. So there is a trust in someone, something greater than yourself to kind of make sense of the reality that we interact with. And it's a deep sense of trust where you are risking something. You're risking not knowing, or you're risking interacting with mystery, or things beyond your comprehension, and then you're reconciling that to with yourself to say, that's okay. There should be things that are greater than me. There should be things that are not knowable, or places that I have not yet begun to explore. And just allowing that, to me, is a part of the human experience. So there's a trust that I have in God that goes beyond what I can comprehend or articulate at times. And sometimes that travels well in different spaces. Sometimes it's totally rejected. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I have learned to accept that effect. I don't need to control how people feel about that, but I do need to explore it for myself.
Yeah, and it's so many. Oh my gosh, dude, my mind is on fire right now.
You just speak beautifully, and I could listen to you talk all day.
Yeah, I mean, I need you in one of those like sleep machines where I just push a button and it just says the rev, and you
Except
just
I would
go.
never go to
Like,
sleep unless he was talking about something boring. But most of the things that he talks about would just keep me wide awake and get my gears turning.
I'd be staring into the center of the universe. That's what I'd be doing. So when you talk about words, and it's hard for me to keep us on track with a conversation this large, but words are so interesting, right? Because you
Yes.
have, if you go Bible, there's words, and there are so many different translations of the Bible and many
Yes.
other texts, right? So you
Yes.
can look at things literally. You could look at things literally in two different translations, but then you have to think about the time that was like you have to think
Yes.
about the context of the time in which it was happening, because
Yes.
give that man that fish means something very different today than it would have back then. And
Yes.
not only that, you also have, imagine I'm like, dude, Devin is such a jerk, versus, Devin, you're a jerk, dude. Same word, different emotion behind it. And
Yeah.
one of those inspires
I
that.
told you guys. Here we go. Here we go. I'm listening. Keep going, Dev.
Come
There's
on,
so much emotion behind that
buddy.
word.
Family is a
Yes.
beautiful thing.
Yeah. So it's so interesting to me. And I do feel like, I don't know where it stems from, but it is certainly one of the things that we need to be most careful about in this day and age, is
Yeah.
back to that word of trust with you, because, I think people are pretty good judges of character. And I think people, in a lot of ways, underestimate ourselves and others' abilities to sort of snuff out what's right and wrong and true and false. And I think a lot of times, like whether it's in the news or just people you talk to, you can feel bad faith actors forcing
Yes.
things upon you. And, when it's news, it's like, are you being informed or are you being persuaded? There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of levels to it, man. But I
Yeah.
think it's a really fascinating topic. And Dev, I'm going to pause because I just like felt compelled to just talk there for a minute
Yeah,
because Rev's got
no.
me spinning.
Well, so question for you, Rev, in regards to kind of your recent, I don't want to call it discovery, but maybe recent chapter, turning of the page, if you will. If there is a discrepancy, is it more around the function of said institution, or is it the way the sort of the religious body as a whole operates and intertwines with culture?
Yeah. I think, we can only express what we know culturally. So, a lot of what the faith or religion is in this country is an expression of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like what Jason was saying about the Bible. We're talking about people from hundreds, thousands of years ago who are interacting with a cultural reality that I think we need to do more work to understand. Like, why would an agricultural example in a parable be something that is relevant for that audience when today we're not interacting with the same set of social circumstances? Language itself, the Hebrew language, can use one word and there can be 15 definitions for that word,
Mm-hmm.
versus the English language is a little more linear. So it's like you can't presume to use the same words the same way. So the same way in our culture, there's people who would say that America is a Christian nation or founded on principles of God. And, our founders, I think it's a little more complicated than that. Like they're theists, they're atheists. There were people who professed to be Christians, but, they treated people really crappy, so I think that why the reason I answer the question good or bad, is that we're bad at like really uncovering those layers, and kind of being a little bit more introspective about what our culture is and what we're communicating to the rest of the world about who God is or who Jesus is, and how we communicate to one another in a way that's functional in society that ultimately can convince other people to place faith in God. So, yeah, there's more I could say, but I want to stop there because I'm going to ask my wife to tell my son to stop playing his drums.
Don't ever stop playing those drums, buddy.
Yeah, I almost want him to just play them louder.
All right. Hopefully we can edit
No,
that
dude,
little
look, man,
thing out.
it is all good. We could just throw something over the top like Rev's son just getting it on the drums.
Yeah, but it ain't like that,
So
dog.
wild.
I promise you,
Dude, it's totally fine. Yeah. So so as you're talking about that, like, do you find where you're at right now with it that you're looking more backwards into faith in a lot of ways? We're playing the telephone game, right? Something happened. There was an original word. It gets translated, it gets passed down, stories are told, layers get added, and now we're receiving it on the end of a telephone line that's now thousands of years old. So do you find yourself searching for the truth going backwards? Do you find it searching for truth now going forward? Like, how do you think about that? Like, is it more we have to go to the roots of it, or we do a good enough job to kind of understand what they're saying and then figure out now what do we do with this? Because people are living now, struggling now,
Yeah.
trying now,
So the popular term right now is a term called deconstruction. It's basically what you just articulated is going back to the start, origin story, trying to figure out where a lot of this came from, not just as far as like what's represented in history and documentation, but personal story. Like, why did this resonate with me? What does that say about me to the rest of the world? And just trying to answer some of those questions. And I think it's work. It's not something that you can just kind of consume in the same way as like a TikTok video. Like, somebody just gives you an answer and it's like, oh yeah, that I agree. Like, no, like it's work because you got to start, really digging into who you are and your identity and some of those questions that you may not want to answer. So I'll say for me in recent years, a lot of that work has been motivated by the loss of my mom. So in 2021, my mom passed suddenly, unexpectedly. She We were notified in June of 2021 that she had stage 4 lung cancer and she was gone in September. So I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, like who am I and where am I in this world? And what's the future look like? I was really close to her. And at the same time, like before she passed on, we were coming out of like the pandemic shutdown. And she started, speaking and acting differently than I ever knew her growing up. So she said, I'm not going back to church. And I'm like, what? You
Yeah.
used to force me to go, no matter
dude,
how
I
I
had the
felt.
same thing. My mom was the same way.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? I'm not, she even went as far to say, like, I'm not coming to your church. And I'm like, oh, snap. Okay. Love you, mom. I'll be by for Soul Food Sunday or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's but it was kind of a trigger point to say, it's time to do some deeper introspection about who I am and what it is I believe. And it was really difficult to do that from a platform or a stage or a pulpit, because I was actively working it out while other people were looking for me to give them answers.
Mm.
And I'm like, I ain't got it.
You mean
Well,
you're
that's
human?
one of the
Yes, I'm
yeah.
human.
Well,
Yes,
that's one of the toughest things, man, because as people we go through things, and you're exactly right. I mean, there's this implied pressure on anyone who stands at that pulpit because it's almost as if you're no longer allowed to be human. Like
yes,
you're the closest we have to the truth, and we
yes.
all need the truth, and like you're the only way we get it. Which my journey, and without getting too deep into my story, I had a very similar situation happen. So I'm so sorry to hear that, brother. And my dad, in a similar fashion, it was stage 4 brain cancer, and it was a
Okay.
similar timeline, and it happened
Man,
10, 12 years ago. And
sorry,
as
bro.
dude, yeah, it was tough, but out of the ashes rose the phoenix that is my now life.
Yeah.
Inspired by you, because I feel like that's like a Rev thing. But but
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, man, it changes you because you're bumping
Does.
along and life is just happening and things are taken for granted, and then the next thing you know, calamity strikes and everything is different. And to say that everything is different doesn't even do it justice, because there is no everything anymore. Like it's just
Hmm.
such a different what is anything,
Yeah.
and it's new perspective. And I'll tell you, man, like maybe you felt the same way, but very few things can challenge a person's faith, in my opinion, as much as an instance like that. Or, there are
Hmm.
quite a few other things, right? I'm not going to say I had it worse than anyone else, but it's trying, man. And then it's
Yeah.
the old for thee and not for me, right? Like, yeah, you got to be strong. This is the will of God. But then it happens to you, and you're like, really, dude? Like,
Yeah.
this is where
Straight
we're
up.
at? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
really?
Straight
Like,
up.
after all we've done?
Yes.
Like,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Not fair. Well, how does the math or how do the law of averages, how does it work this way for me? Like some of those big questions that'll just kind of have you stuck. But I didn't have the luxury of being, even maybe this will surprise you guys, but I'm very much an introvert, and I get energy. I have to recharge, by myself, and it looks weird. It looks kind of like I'm in a dark room somewhere with one blind cracked open, and
I love it. You're in an office underneath the stairs.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Harry Potter looking ass.
Yes.
My wife will come into the room, and I feel like I have to apologize, for scaring her, like, because I'm just trying to just reclaim any kind of energy or whatever. But at the end of the day, that expectation from that position of leadership can feel dehumanizing,
Mm,
because it's like, you're supposed to be a hero, or you're supposed to be heroic in the face of tragedy, in the face of loss. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, you're not going to do that to me, and not let me have a moment to recover
mm,
from the circumstances of life in the very same way that you ask me to be present with you as you're going through the circumstances of life. So that goes to my critique about the institution, what it's supposed to represent. There are these people who are presented in a light that is not human, and ultimately maintaining that image is what keeps the function going, keeps the money coming in, it keeps people rallying around this concept and idea of truth and faith, but it's under false pretenses. So, and it's not even really in totality. If you read the Bible, it's not even what the Bible projects
100%.
for the so-called heroes in Scripture. Like they all failed massively
Hmm.
and publicly.
Hmm.
So it was just like it was incompatible. It's like, okay, so you want me to preach from this thing, and you want me to preach something that's not here and tell other people to believe it. So I'm still deconstructing. I'm not done. It's just I feel like I'm in a place where I can articulate some of it.
I mean, knowing you like I do, I feel like when I think about one of when I think about the perfect person to be able to bridge that gap from what is the sort of picturesque ideal pastor that fulfills that role that you just described versus the real side of all of this. Not to flip the script, but I feel like you're the perfect person to do it, because you are real and
Man,
you do have that sort of authentic delivery about these things, literally what we're talking about. And in my personal experience, some of the most meaningful, impactful pastors in my life have been the ones that are so real that you have come to know some of their flaws and the realization that they are people. They are not perfect. No human is perfect, right? Like,
yeah,
anyway, whether we keep it or not, I
yeah.
just wanted to let you know that that's how I feel.
Man, I appreciate that, bro. Because there's times at group school where I wondered. I'm like, man, I hope these guys don't think I'm like some legalistic, I don't know, man.
Oh
Like
no, we did, but we loved you
I
for it. No,
just,
I'm just playing.
Dude, yeah, you were probably the only reason we didn't set that whole city on fire, dude. Like the flames were burning and you were always the sprinkler system just calming everything down. But what I wanted to say to you, man, is that as a man of faith myself, like I always felt like, and this is going to be weird, but you just have to trust the spirit with which I'm saying it, is like every day you were spreading the word or preaching to us in a good way without even knowing it. Like it was never a sermon, it was never intentional. Like you were just acting in a way that was always very inspiring to me, and I would say
Admirable, yeah.
honestly couldn't have not been to the entire class. And I don't know that you've ever given yourself credit for it or ever really thought about it, but just from one man's perspective to you, like you were always something. I hate to even admit this. I don't hate to admit it, but I'm going to admit it for the people. You were one of the people in our class. Whenever you spoke, I mean, honestly, man, whenever you did anything, you were one of the very few people that I was always like in awe of, and I had never really understood how you did it. Like I never understood how you did it. Like with Dev and I, it's like I kind of get our shtick a little bit, and I even to Dev, like Dev is incredible with people in ways that I'm
yeah.
good too. But I watch him sometimes, and you're like, how did you? Why? How? But dude, everything you did was shot through with that. It was such confidence. It was such command. It was right. It was beautiful. It felt like everything came from such a good place. And I just wanted you to know that, man. I never told you, but the way I looked at you, man, you floated above us and you were glowing from my perspective, dude. It was like
Wow.
not even in like any sort of intentionally religious way. It was just like you were just something, man.
Dude, like I was jealous of you guys, man. It seemed like it was the stuff that we were being kind of taught and offloaded and prepared for. You guys were like naturals at. And I'm like, man, how am I going to fit in this
I
matrix?
think we just didn't give a
So
shit.
I'm
Yeah. Dude, we were good at the insurance, you were good at life, and I'd pick your
Yeah.
superpower over mine every day.
dude, well, that was it then because I'm like, oh, okay. You guys are going to lead exciting lives after this. I'm going to be condemned to the Midwest and, I'll never be heard from again, so it
And now the
was, it was
world is
something
getting
I
to
was,
meet the Rev.
Uh-huh. Yeah, baby.
dude,
Tell him, Rev.
I'm just humbled by that, man, because, these are conversations I don't know if we could have had at the time, because I think I was still kind of figuring out my own identity. So, it's refreshing to reflect in ways where it's like we are now experienced in life, or we have like some perspective on maybe some of the whys that we didn't have from that time. So it's just humbling to just revisit that time period and even know that there was any kind of reflection that looked like that, man. Because dude, I was figuring it out. Like we were all reading business school for dummies and trying to figure out like what what we should actually apply versus like, okay, what's really the secret to this whole mechanism of health insurance? And it wasn't any of that stuff. It was relationships.
Dude,
And I think that's really what I took away from it.
That's
yeah, we
life, man.
were we were trying to Yeah, we were trying to figure out Etna when the whole time we were supposed to be figuring out ourselves and still
Yeah.
kind of are to
Yeah.
this day. Dude, so I have a question for you. And this one I don't know how it's going to go, but what are your thoughts? And this question came from my brother actually
Yeah.
with my framing. What are your thoughts on our boy Oedipus? And
Oedipus.
so the question is free will or predetermination?
Oh man, see these days I'm kind of frustrating because I'm a why not both kind of person,
Mm,
Okay.
so
we love that.
there's there's a sense of our own agency to make decisions, and then there are things that translate to what people would call fate or predetermination that we didn't plan. So there are circumstances that we find ourselves almost kind of falling into, and then we have to use our tools to make decisions within that framework. So I'm a both guy. I think that my trust in God is that, He is organizing purposes and strategies for all of us to experience individual opportunities to make sound decisions, wise decisions, or learn from our mistakes. But at the same time, we're given agency to decide. We have cognitive ability to choose. Like we should use our minds to the furthest potential, um, to be able to engage with a moment or to engage with a person. So I'm kind of operating in the tension between the two.
Mm.
Do you okay? So, and sorry, Dev. I'm just after this. I will relinquish control. I feel like I've got a stronghold, and I'm not trying to.
Buddy, don't apologize. Never apologize for a beautiful conversation.
So Rev. So I think about this a lot, and I also, outside of, but probably coinciding with faith, I think about, the whole, is everything meant to happen? Does everything happen for a reason? And I feel like whether it was my father, whether it was group school, we all have this series of what I will say, what I will call formative moments.
Mhm.
And I love the way you think about it because the interaction that I'm seeing from what you're saying is that it's almost like predetermination is the tree, and then at where each of the branches come off is really free will, and it determines what branch you go down. And
Mhm.
it's like predetermination gets you there, and then all of a sudden there's this thing, and it's like, all right, here's your
Mhm.
lesson. Which which are you going to choose? And
Yeah.
then whether it's predetermination that gets you to the next node, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
Yeah.
is this the way you kind of think of it, or like is it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's a weird. The both topic is like you blew my mind with that, so I'm processing actively.
Yeah, I'm processing it too, man. Where I think, I grew up with these books called Choose Your Own Adventure. And like in the book is kind of like these circumstances that are all predetermined, but it offers you the choice at some part of the story to choose a path. I think on Netflix there's a version of Black Mirror that you can watch where you actively have to participate in the outcomes of the show. And you're basically watching things play out based on your choices. But then if you have the book or if you're interacting with the streaming service, you get a chance to go back and make a different decision and see how things are playing out. So it's like if I'm taking the God view, it's like this is the one being who gets to see how all of this plays out. But there are people who are actively participating in the story, and we have the privilege of participating in a certain way that uses our creative abilities for reasoning. And again, like, mistakes are part of it. It's not like the framework of right and wrong is so easily defined at certain times. Like, I think there are things that I could have done. I mean, I recently said this and I'm still processing this. Is like, I don't regret things. Like, regret is not like a part of my framework now. because I think that if I would have tried to go back and change something, then I still would have been faced with the same lesson at some other point in time. So it's not necessarily something that I could have changed. If I would have avoided that circumstance, it would have come up again in some way until I learned what I needed to learn and then use that tool for a future decision. So I'm constantly thinking about this stuff, but again, the older I get, it's less of the framework of control where I'm trying to control everything. Like certain things I just have to accept, and even in that, like learning a degree of humility. You know, my practices of faith to me that I'm most dialed in with are nuance and curiosity. Like I don't need everything to just shift one way to make sense. Like I think there's nuance, there's context, and then curiosity is just being open. Like why be dogmatic when you only lived on one part of the world in one part of the world for your whole life? And then you travel to the other side of the world, and it's like I never forget when I went to Europe. We went to Barcelona for the first time, and I was angry that I went to a payphone to find our shuttle to the hotel, and I was angry that there was no English words on the phone, and I'm like, you know, how am I supposed to get to my hotel? I'm pissed off in Barcelona, Spain, that I had to reframe my mind around the fact that I was in a whole nother place and then adjust to the circumstances. And it humbled me at that moment.
Well, dude, yeah, your humility is absolutely world class, and I'm gonna change gears a bit here, if
Okay.
that's okay with you two gentlemen. We're always interested to hear what role an individual plays within their friend group, and so we're listening to you here, and like I usually can anticipate. I'm often wrong, but at least I have a read as to where I think it's going to go. I have no clue, dude, what you're about to say. But the framing for you is some people think of friend groups in terms of there is the mom, the dad, the planner, the whatever. And as Dev and I have been exploring this question with people, we think of it more in terms of we're all, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and we wear different badges. So, for instance, Devin has the grilling badge. He has the set the vibe badge. He's the
Mm,
straw that stirs the drink badge. He's
mm.
got a really cool beard badge. What role do you play in your friend group? What badges do you wear, Rev?
the the what is it? The conflict resolution guy.
Mm-hmm.
The leader feels like it just feels redundant, but there's somebody who has to take charge, you know, be decisive. And I'm just looking around for somebody else to do it, but it typically falls in my lap. Um, but then I have to be also kind of like an atmosphere changer. So in the sense of we're all at the breakfast table on Sunday, and we hear about the Biden announcement, and everybody's just reacting at the same time, and so there's tension, there's angst, there's conflict, and I'm like, it's time for some levity. Like it's time to laugh. Like this is ridiculous. We're sitting in Cracker Barrel trying to solve the problem.
We're in the Cracker Barrel solving this puzzle with the pegs.
Right. Like our kids are literally playing with the peg, and we're over here like we've got the answers to whatever. Like, just relax. You're taking yourself way too seriously with your cold pancakes. So it's just it's like let's stop. you know
With your cold pancakes.
yeah, like you got like one triangle cut out of your pancakes, and you're passionately arguing why Kamala's not going to be the solution. And it's just like, yo, man, we got to think about something else right now because the family's here and we don't really get a chance to get the family together, and our
Mm-hmm.
kids are watching us.
Mm-hmm.
So for some reason, like that's where my brain goes
Mm-hmm.
instead of just kind of jumping into the mud. So I have to initiate that kind of stuff often. And then just in general, just the creative, like, in the church, I get frustrated with some of these limited frameworks people have for like practicing faith or practicing trust in God. And I'm like, use your imagination. Why do
Mm-hmm.
we have to do this? You know, like
It's okay to do it
I,
differently.
I yeah, man, like I instituted what we call Sabbath Sunday, where we literally take a Sunday off and say like we're not doing church today. Like stay home, spend some time with your family. My childhood trauma's coming out. Like I wish my parents would have let me stay home, like, not force me to go to church, and my faith is going to collapse if I don't go. Like, no, stay home. Or how about this? How about visit another church? How
Mm.
about see something that somebody else is doing so you don't think that we're the ones who save the whole city?
Man, you're the most
So it's
selfless person. I mean, that is for a leader of a church to say that just shows everything about where your heart is. Like that is beautiful.
But Devin, I'm about to step down. I'm about to stop pastoring. So
I mean, I get
that's
it, but
even
but 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 to Jason's point, buddy, you could have the title of pastor or not, as evident by your answer to your role in your friend group and our experience with you. Buddy, whether the title of pastor is on your chest or you continue through life in whatever venture you decide to go on, you will be a pastor figure to all of those around you. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it was in A Few Good Men, but it's you don't have to wear a badge on your chest to have honor. And and interestingly, so one of my most recent experiences with faith, so I was down in North Carolina visiting my brother, and we were going to a different place of worship than the one we had typically gone to for reasons not worth explaining right now, but we can talk about it as friends later if you want, or some other day. But I found that, the two, still Southern Baptist, but they were very different tones. Like one was more, I left it and I
yeah,
felt like I was the worst. And the
yeah,
other one, I left it and I felt like we're all humans and none of us know what we're talking about ever. But that's okay because we're
yeah,
Sounds
good.
like
A couple
sounds like
thousand years
versions
ago.
of Southern Baptist.
Right, yeah. And but what was interesting about it and what you just reminded me of was a conversation around church and what is church. And the pastor was talking about it and he said, a lot of you think church is this building. This is a bunch of wood stacked in a framework that kind of looks like other places that other people call churches, but church is outside. Church is in your car. Church is in your bathroom. Church is in your house. Church is in your pool. Church is everywhere. Like you don't just practice your faith here, and if you do, like you miss the plot, bud. Like it's
Yeah.
not how this works.
yeah, straight up.
So that's the
Yes.
thing, man. Like, I mean, dude, it doesn't matter what you do or what your title is, you're still going to be the reason everyone goes to Cracker Barrel. We all know it. You're the leader. That's what it is.
And I mean, let's be honest.
And
We called you the Rev before you were even a pastor, so that'll hold
dude,
too.
That's
that
true.
was I'm telling you, this is why that period will end up in some chapter that I write some point, because again, that was one of those predetermination moments. That was not in my control. That wasn't something I was trying to, project. It just like I walked into it and it was something that was already kind of going on in my heart. So it was like, wow, I guess I should think about this a little bit more, because it felt like a confirmation of a train of thought
Because
that I
these
was already
jabronis are
on.
calling me the Reverend.
Dude, like I couldn't freaking get away from it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, but I just think that kind of stuff, you just can't make that kind of stuff up.
I love it. So speaking of being a Reverend, what did you want to be when you were a kid? And and then for some people, where did that go wrong?
You know, I wanted to be an and one mixtape basketball player. And
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
You and me both.
let me count the ways where that went wrong. Like, like first of all, that's not a viable career. So you probably want to be something that's going to earn income. But beyond that, man, like honestly, like I was one of those kids who went to college with the hopes that it was going to help me figure that out. You know, like I just thought I was going to be in the space of learning and possibility, and somehow it was just going to drop on me, you know. But like many of my experiences, colleges wasn't about the career path, it was about relationships and the network that I built with people there that led to possible career paths. So it's like whatever I knew, whatever it was going to be, I knew it was going to involve the arts or creativity because my parents were into music. My dad wrote music. My mom traveled Europe singing like in a gospel group, and my brother right now to this day, he's an artist and travels everywhere. And you know that part of my family was always musically inclined, so I knew I was going to have to use some sort of creative instinct somewhere, but I just didn't know how to translate it.
So, Rev, you, you, you're, I don't know why, but when I listen to you talk, you stimulate parts of my brain that have been shut off since the last time I heard you talk. And dude, I've been thinking, this is one of Devin's favorite questions, and I absolutely adore it. And you said something that just like, here's what I thought. I'll just tell you what I thought. I don't even know what I'm trying to do with this. I feel like my entire life, I have been, for the first part of my life, I was on a path and I just kept yelling at the top of my lungs that I was on this path. Hey, everyone, I am on this path. And it took me until I started quieting down, and then I stopped telling everyone I was on a path, and I stopped even talking. And then I just heard whispers, and I
Mm-hmm.
started following the whispers, and I started going down another path. And once I became cool with that, that's in large part what led us to this show, which is what led us back to you. And I can just tell you, I don't know that I've ever been happier than I am now following those little whispers.
Yeah.
And again, it's you said something earlier about you didn't know what you wanted to be, and man, most of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life, dude, I'm 38. Other than this podcast, I don't have a clue what I'm doing with my life. Like, I
Yeah.
know this is super fun, but like, I don't know, man. Like, and I think that's so cool. And I think that's one of the beauties. I feel like Devin right now. That's one of the beautiful things of life. Like, life is just this amazing thing that we get to do for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And God, like, we have like a whole other one of the ones that we just did left. And I'm following I don't know, man. I feel like I'm writing a book now. I don't know. You got me fired
You,
up.
Jason's going to
you
write a book
should.
about how much he loves the Rev.
I am.
You guys, listen, what I think one of the refreshing things about you guys that I remember was like everybody in that room, it was like full of tension with some people about like what are they gonna do? Like, you know, are we gonna be successful, and you know, how are we gonna be in our roles? You guys were like unbothered. You know, it was refreshing because it was like a resting confidence, like we're gonna figure it out. You know, like Devin would say something beyond the subject matter that would just make you think transcendently about whatever this module was we were learning. And, you know, maybe not downplaying the instructor or whatever, but it was just like, guys, like, it's not going to come down to this. And for me, like, it was such a healthy contrast to some of the pressure and the tension that I was feeling from other people because they were just like, if it doesn't work here, then I'm done in life. And I think you guys kind of carried that and brought that spirit, that energy to our group in a way where it just helped us understand, or at least helped me understand that it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Even if this thing doesn't pan out, we're going to figure this out. And I felt like you guys have been tapped into that, like beyond like whatever that moment was telling us in group school. And I took that with me, man. I went back home and I was just like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, but at least I know somebody who's giving me confidence it's going to be fine. It's going to work out.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't not if it makes you feel any better, we didn't have a clue what we were doing.
That's probably
Still
why
don't.
we had that vibe, right? Because I was like, well, I'm not going to pretend, so I'm just going to act like everything's cool because I got no idea what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's
Shit,
like-
I left
it's
2
like
years later, moved to Florida and tried to play golf. Like, so much for
Yeah,
group
yeah.
school.
dude, for sure. Well, Rev, so there, I don't know if you guys heard it, but there was a little whisper in the wind. You had said something that I think we need to tap back into. You mentioned it. It was very fleeting. Music.
You know, it is it is kind of like one of those joys and privileges that I feel like I have, kind of disconnected from, you know, a career path or even like a capitalistic pursuit, where I feel like I can tell everybody short form what my journey is, in a creative way. So there's a story that I'm telling, but I'm telling it artfully, where I can't do some of the same things from the pulpit. You know, like there's like a limited framework of how you communicate a message in that setting. And in music, you know, you can go so much further beyond that. You can use imagery, metaphor, and you can even be transparent in a way that, you know, just people allow it. It's just like, oh yeah, he's getting it out. You know, it's kind of like this catharsis, like, yeah, we'll allow it because it's on a song, you know,
Yeah.
but don't come around here saying that without any kind of sweet production
Any
or,
kind
you
of beat
know,
behind
beautiful.
it.
Yeah, it's aesthetically, like, you know, talking about the Kendrick and Drake. Like, I don't know if anybody could have heard Not Like Us with no beat. Like that's a totally different experience. Like, what in the world is this dude talking about? You know, but that space just allows for freedom. So right now I'm just kind of exploring the journey that I'm on right now with faith and relationships and the possibilities of church beyond like the framework of the institution. And weirdly enough, with rap, it feels like you're supposed to be done at like age 30. But, you know, for me at age 40, like I feel like I have more clarity than I've ever had. So I think the rappers in the best sense, most idealistic sense, are like the modern day poets who provide commentary on society. As long as you're not tied to a business model and you have to market and brand, you can really say some important things and stimulate intellectual activity, interaction, relationships in ways that most other music forms don't really explore.
So why the one thing I haven't really quite grappled with yet is why does Drake go to Atlanta?
Colonizer. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Listen, Kendrick, man, he really read that man his rights as far as I'm concerned. Like, you know, it's like when you see mega stars, there's like a light that they walk in that you don't usually hear people like speak about them in that way. Like he like ripped him to shreds. He talked about his family. He talked about like his own struggle with his identity and then his presence in the music industry and the effect that it's had generationally on our kids. You know, like that was a surgical uh man. That was beyond a battle, man. Like that was just like a public flogging.
Dude, and he stands on it, man. Like he was in a
Yes.
concert, I think it was out here on the West Coast, and he sang it 5 times. Like he is like homie is not playing around. And I think to your point,
Yeah.
man, like it was one of those things, it was one of those moments in life where like I don't know too many other moments like it where everyone universally was like something major just happened.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that, and it came out so quick, and it was like the beat and the words, because you had said, you know, the words without the beat and the beat without the words. It's like those two things were high school lovers and will be married till they're 150.
150, man.
Dude, like they don't look at other people. They don't see anybody else. Like it was just, and dude, I'm no rap aficionado. I listened to it casually, but I knew
Yeah.
something happened. I was
Yeah.
like, dude, and like I'm sitting there in my car and I feel hard about it. And I'm like, dude, I'm not even part of any of this, but I'm in on this one. You know?
They're playing it at the Olympics right now, man. Like this is incredible. Like I never I never could imagine this kind of song translating globally in this way.
That's
And yet,
incredible.
like, yeah, it's incredible. There's principles like kind of tucked in the messaging. Like there's a commentary against like who Drake represents, like as an image, as a brand, as an influence that Kendrick is specifically pointing to and say, we don't do that weirdo stuff. Like that's like inconsistent with integrity or morals or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the message I take away is distinction. Like there's a distinction between people who do that stuff and those of us who operate this way. So the beauty about that, the artistic beauty of that is how in many ways that can translate. Like I think very simply, the United States is just like they're not like us in Canada, like, and they really aren't.
No, well, and it's to your point, man, like it feels like, the song to some feels like an infinitesimally small laser beam pointed directly at Drake. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, and listening to what you just said, it opened my mind about it because like that song's about Drake, but that song's not really even about Drake. Like
Nope.
it's
Yep.
not, and I didn't even think about that until right this second. But I'm like,
Yep.
which is like a whole other level of like,
Yep.
dude, that guy is a bad man.
Yeah. Bad man.
Ah,
Bad man.
I hope he
Legion,
never, like, hope he doesn't listen to this and take offense to anything I say because I don't need one of those about me, man. Like,
dude. The acronym for Drake now in hip hop circles is Drake. His name acronym. Don't rap against Kendrick ever. That
oh,
is.
Mm.
dude, dude, like even Eminem was like pulls the hoodie down a little deeper and he's like, yeah, I'm good, man. I hope like
Yeah.
we're cool. He writes a song like Kendrick is cool. Sorry,
And
Em,
that's
I
the
loved
dark
you, but
dude.
man, like I don't want to see the world explode, so we don't need to point our nukes at each other. That's what that would. We don't need to point our nukes at each other.
Yes.
We're good.
Yep, yep. I love it. So a part of my journey I haven't really got a chance to talk to you guys about is I am now teaching high school government social studies for one semester a year.
No way.
So yeah, yeah. So I'm the teacher who is like relating with some of the students, but I'm really just fascinated about how they see the world.
Mm-hmm.
So their commentary on this whole situation is fascinating, man. Like it's just a whole nother energy.
Yeah, and I mean, do they like where? Because we're coming at it with the perspective of a 38, a 40, and a Devin. You're 35,
Yeah, just a young boy.
a 35-year-old.
34.
He's just a young lad. But like, what is it like? How do they receive that song? Like, or is it to them? It's like this just sounds rad, or do they? Because I mean, it sounds rad. We all know what happened. Like the flogging is real, but like, is it
Yeah.
anything more than that for them? You think, or they just receive it differently?
It is visceral, and then of course it turns into, the way that they get to have a good time. But they are also translating the message about, how adults interact with minors, like
Oh
that's
yeah,
resonating with them, so
As it should.
this whole narrative around who Drake is and what he does, like, is hitting them differently, and it's causing them to put their guard up or at least establish a distinction between that kind of conduct. So
Which is a beautiful thing.
it's crazy. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. No, he put so many people on watch and like in such an undeniable, unmistakable way. And
yeah,
even, and again, like, the crowd the guys that he had on stage with him, like he was uniting gangs in
yep,
LA on
yep,
stage, which like, I mean, I again don't know enough about it, but I just cannot imagine that was an easy thing to do, man. Like
No.
that song, everyone was like, you know what, for at least one night, like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
it ain't like us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, so I have to do this, Rev, and I apologize in advance, but I have to challenge your humility for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, and this is I'm so excited about this one because you're such a fascinating guy who does all sorts of stuff. There is a worldwide competition. All 8.5, 8.6 billion people on planet Earth get to participate. You can't limit it on age, race, gender, dexterity, social security number, first name. Everyone's eligible to participate, and you need to finish in the top 10,000. What are the rules of your competition?
Man.
And while you mull it over,
How many rules? How
you
many
can
rules
make
can I?
so the more specific, the better.
Yep.
And they could be as many rules as you want to make.
Okay. Okay.
And hey, go ahead if you got one.
No. Go ahead. I want to hear more. I'm
Yeah.
processing.
Okay, so while you process, so examples from Devin and I. So Devin's example was golf, and we ran through the numbers, and he is actually most likely in the top 10,000 in the world at that, which is amazing because golf is so hard. Mine, because I'm not as talented as Devin at really anything other than talking to people into this microphone here. Mine was last minute travel. So I am really good at booking last minute travel. You have to fly tomorrow. You can't book it before 8 p.m. tonight. You can't show up at the airport more than an hour before your flight takes off. You can't enter the airport any sooner than 45 minutes before it takes off. And your heart rate cannot go 10% above baseline. So that's like my level of specificity with it.
That's freaking crazy. You did not come up with that on the spot. That was
No,
that.
he
Was
did.
that like
He
you
did.
guys?
That was it.
Dude, listen, man. That genius intellect just you guys are on another level because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say you have to create a rap song that is no longer than a minute 30. So the time frame for an Instagram reel.
Ooh.
You have to tell the story of your life between the ages of 16 and 30, and you have to do it without using any profanity.
Oh.
And you have to, for it to even be valid, it has to reach 7,000 plays on Instagram. So you can't just say I did it. It actually has to achieve something.
Sure.
And I think I probably have some more parameters after I get off this call, but I'll say, yeah, there
I
you
love
go.
it. By the way, I meant to tell you, I still have School of Roses on my Apple Music. So send your brother
See,
some
man,
love.
Yeah.
Listen, man, my brother is the closest thing that I'm going to get to like one of those musical geniuses that I just got to live with. Like that dude plays instruments by ear, like so he hears a sound and he just sits down and just starts tinkering, and before you know it, it is composed. So
That's amazing.
he deserves everything you're hearing. That dude is the orchestrator of it. He's still doing his thing. It's what he loves, and I definitely will pass along that love.
That's awesome. So we're gonna just keep rolling, being mindful of time.
Yep.
We're gonna go into my avenue of food. So
Okay.
you got one day left. What is your last supper?
Man, that's a really interesting question, man, because I've had to recently give up a lot. I can't eat pizza anymore, guys.
What?
Pizza
You're
is
allergic
not
to the
it's not
marinara sauce?
it's just not agreeing with me, like
No.
there's a disagreement down below, so I need
Hey, it happens,
to.
buddy. Once you hit
It
34,
does.
everything starts changing. That little gremlin says, no, 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 no.
Nah, not gonna eat the pizza. Oh,
It's probably going to be disappointing, but I
It ain't
am
my dinner,
definitely
bub. It's
going to
yours.
go.
yeah, it's your last day, not mine.
Well, my latest place that I'd never visited before was Seattle, Washington, and um, for me, my experience, my culinary experience that I left with was some of the greatest Asian food I've ever eaten.
Wow.
So I would say I don't even know the name of the restaurant, but this again disappointing. It had to be a General So's esque type of platter with spicy chicken, a glazed sauce. If I could order from that place and sit down and eat to my heart's desire, I'd die happy, man.
I love it. We got to find the name of the
Dude,
place
yeah.
and we got to make a trip to Seattle.
Dude.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta find it for you guys, man. Because first of all,
Isn't
Seattle was a vibe.
isn't our
Yeah,
boy Abe out in Seattle?
is he?
I think
I didn't know.
he's on the West Coast and I think he's in the Northwest. I think
Man,
he might
I
he
would.
might be or he might have been, but he was definitely there for a little while.
I mean, if
That's
he's
good to
there,
know.
yeah, if
Yeah.
he's there, we need to circle the wagons real quick.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
and
If I would have known, I would have looked him up.
dude, and the general says, by the way, the spicier the better. I've always found like there's something about like because if it's too sweet, it's just not great. But that little bit of spice, man, dude, I haven't had it in ages, and I've been doing so great on the eating, and I've been losing weight. But you might have just given me my 200 pounds cheat meal because that's where we're going.
Boy, Jay, way to be, buddy.
No, that's good people. Good things happen. It's like, I don't know
Yeah.
who is whose muse here, but something awesome is all around us. So there was actually a leftover question from last week, by the way. So what we do is, and we will ask you the same question that we asked him to get to this point. But the question will be ultimately, what question should we ask the next guest? Last week, we had your boy Colin.
Mhm.
And his answer to this, which we are now asking you, is what is your favorite memory as a child?
Man, that's tough. I will say, uh, 8 or 9 years old, week long trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. This is when um, the Smoky Mountains was a thing, but there's this place that probably looks like a shanty town now, but at the time when I was a kid, it was like the most magical place on earth. It was a place called Pigeon Forge,
Yeah.
and it had like it was like a mall of arcades. So this
Oh,
is back when people actually went and played arcade video games. And dude, as a kid, I was in heaven, man. They had the
Yeah, you
best
were.
go-karts, like
best go-karts.
go-karts hit different at 8, 9 years old. Like,
Oh,
bro,
I mean,
don't
they
they
still
ever?
hit now.
like
It just I got to pretend like they
Yeah,
don't.
they
they
do.
do. They
They do.
do. They do. You're right, Dev. Like they do hit. It's like recapturing that. But at the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
time,
No doubt.
man, bro, like, yeah, that was magical. I would go back to that time in a heartbeat.
Gatlinburg, Smoky Mountains, Pigeon Forge, Arcade Mall.
Yes, sir.
I love
Yes,
it.
sir.
There was a part
Yes,
two
sir.
from the mayor, and it was along a similar lines, and it was who had the most positive influence on you as a child.
Hmm. Man, see, like I date myself with some of these answers because the first answer that came to my mind is somebody you guys probably wouldn't even think of, but it was Captain Planet. It was an old cartoon, and he was like
Dude,
an environmentally conscious superhero.
Dude, he's our hero.
So
He's going to take pollution down to zero.
yeah,
I remember him, that blue moth.
the blue.
Dude, he
I
was
love that
rad.
the power is yours.
Yours,
Like,
dude. Yeah. And it
yeah,
was. It really was.
I,
Oh.
I
Captain
love that. So
Planet.
that's the cartoon, but the real life version of it, positive influence.
That's
It was
tremendous.
it was probably Carl Winslow from Family Matters. Either him or Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince.
Carl Winslow, dude, the cop
Yeah.
who was always like doling out lessons and like swift
Yes.
justice.
Yep. Yep. He was
I love
he
it
was a
so
good
much.
dad. Reginald Vell Johnson, one
Dude.
cameo in Die Hard as well. So
Dude, what did you think of when they started doing that story arc where Steve started becoming Stefan? Where it was like, I don't know if he went into a machine or something, but he came out all
yes,
suave and cool.
my fantasy, bro, because whatever you imagine about me right now, there was a time, these kids now, they wear like glasses frames without the pane. Like, I needed my glasses, and there was no fashion frames. I was living Urkel, like,
Oh,
there, there was no chamber for me to change into Stefan. Like, and he got out that freaking machine. He took his glasses off. I would have been blind, bro. Like, there's I don't know if I would have chosen Laura. I would have blindly selected someone.
dude, Laura.
But
Oh my God,
I
dude.
I
Yeah.
lived I lived
Yes.
through that.
Dude, you just like, you literally you packed me into like some little rocket and sent me back in time right there. Because I remember, dude, like being a kid, just like Laura was
Yeah.
my shit. Like more than Topanga. I
Yeah.
was team Laura,
More than
dude.
Topanga.
More than
Interesting.
Topanga. Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know
Okay.
why. I mean, I was a Topanga guy. I was.
Yeah.
But
Same.
Laura, man, there was something about her back then.
Just ruffled your
Back
feathers.
to the pod. back to the pod.
In the spirit of being mindful of your time, mindful of your family's time, and in the spirit of paying it forward, we have two final questions. One, what question should we ask the next guest that we have on this esteemed podcast?
Esteemed. Syndicated.
Yes. Who was the most terrifying fictional character of your childhood?
Love
It's
it.
another dude. Like, because again, Colin hit us with one last week, and it was the one you got, and he took us. He's the reason we ended up at Captain Planet.
Yeah, he is. Shout out to the mayor.
It was
What
like,
if the next person's like Captain Planet? That whole environment saying and being terrified
Oh my
me.
god!
Who is the most terrifying fictional character from your childhood?
Captain Planet. Dude, could you imagine? Big A
Tears
just
streaming.
Captain Planet. Yeah, he like
Fuck
gets
the
all in his
environment.
feelings about it. He's like, man, I haven't thought about this in a while, but like, remember that blue muff?
Oh my god!
And the last question would be, obviously with your permission and with some thought,
Sure.
who should we interview next on this podcast? Preferably someone you know. So in the spirit of the goal here is to have this sort of web of relationships continue to grow, right? So I'll give you an example. The mayor gave us a name of one of his really close friends who he said that both Jason and I kind of reminded him of his friend and that he would
Okay.
kind of get along with the vibe. It could also be we've had an answer like, I don't think this guy would have much to say, but I think if you guys were able to get him to say stuff, it would be really interesting. So we got another name from a different guest. So it could be anyone.
Well, I think I went still straight back to group school. I'd love to hear from Ben Jenkins.
Oh.
I'd love.
Oh.
Old Sly Jenkins himself.
I love it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from. Yeah. I love Ben. That would be. Oh man, I tune in. I love that.
Hey, if
Done.
you'll tune in, man. Yeah, there
Yes.
it is.
Consider it
Devin's
done.
writing it down. And when he writes stuff down, you know it's serious.
Because I don't write a lot of stuff
Let's
down.
go. Yes.
Yeah, well, hey, Rev. So you're free to stick around, but we want to both really thank you, man. I mean, again, you meant so much to us back then. Continue to do so. Means so much to us now. It's been an absolute pleasure. We know you've got the family, the kiddos running around, and we appreciate the drums from earlier. We will be keeping them in the show, just so you
Oh
know.
my gosh, I'm
But
sorry, bro.
no,
No.
dude, and that's not even like a backhanded. Like, we love that it's just like you're in your environment, dude. Like, that's what this thing's all about. So
100%.
we can't thank you enough, buddy. I really appreciate you spending the time with us and going through all you did, man. That was awesome.
Dude, I appreciate you guys. I can't stress enough. The timing is perfect, and if we do another one of these, like I'd probably be on another journey somewhere else, like just figuring things out as they go right now. So stuff is materializing. I'm just glad I could document where I'm at right now. You guys have been inspiring to me. Again, I told you what that meant in group school. Now even hearing like the purpose behind this pod, man, I'm like, yes. Like people who can step outside the matrix and just like say, this is what we're going to do.
Hmm.
If nothing else for us. Man, thank you guys for letting me be a part of it.
Buddy, thank you. And it has just become official by vote of the two hosts that, no offense to previous guests or future guests, but you are 100% going to be a regular guest on this pod, whether it's annually or some version of it, because, buddy, this was exceptional, and we love you, dog.
We should have some unhinged political commentary, like at some point, like
Uh-huh.
like that would
Uh-huh.
be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes, we should.
we
I
should.
would love to do that.
Zero hinges.
Zero hinges and the recording button turned off, other than for
Yeah,
our
it
own
will be
reviewing purposes. It will not go public.
All right, guys, listen, I appreciate you, man. Yeah, just let me know when this goes live. I can't wait to see it.
Absolutely, brother.